30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds.
Hi,
My name's J3 McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small, host and producer of Face to Face. Face to Face is one of two different programs that I have the pleasure of hosting and producing live every single week at AccessTV.org studio. Face to Face is a show that's designed to ask the guests the hard questions and give you, the viewers, the answers and information that you deserve to know. This morning we have a returning guest to the AccessTV.org network. I've had the pleasure of having him as an in-studio guest on the All About You talk show. He was also early in the stages of the Morning Talk Live with J. Stan McCauley talk show as a Zoom guest, and have the pleasure of having him for the first time on the Face-to-Face talk show. This guest has a tremendous amount of experience in the sports industry in general, but particularly when he gets into as a sports director, sports background knowledge. He's covered just about every major sporting event that has existed in the United States and probably beyond. The guest this morning is no other than WFSB Ch3 Sports Director, Joe Zone. Good morning, Joe. How are you doing?
Good morning. I am great and happy to be here. Good to see you again.
Okay, Joe, would you like to let people know a little bit more about your background, or do you kind of want to jump into our main topics of discussion?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing is this year is my 50th year in television and broadcasting. That's it's hard to do anything 50 years. So suffice it to say that nothing has ever happened in local TV sports broadcasting that I haven't seen, done, or thought of, believe me.
Right. Okay. Now, as a sports director for WFSB Channel 3, you kind of cover the regional areas of sports like the New York Giants, the New England Patriots, the New York Yankees, the Boston Red Sox. But you also have a tremendous amount of expertise in national levels of sports. This particular period of time right now, you have Major League Baseball, you have the NBA basketball playoffs. We're just coming off of the college women's and men's basketball championship. What kind of stands out to you so far for 2025 as some of the biggest sporting news events that has currently taken place?
Well, that there are a lot of things. I mean, the biggest story right now, as far as I'm concerned, will be the college sports model is going to change completely, and they're going to start paying, and schools are going to start paying athletes. It's going to come out of a fund, a budget, and they'll be like salaries, and that's going to pass and go through and in July. And starting in August, when these new athletes are on campus, athletic directors around the country are going to have to start figuring out ways to divvy up X amount of dollars. Who gets it? What sport gets it? How does it affect Title IX? How will it affect some of the minor sports? It's going to be the biggest sports story in the country going forward over the next couple of months.
Now, Joe, is this going to be in every particular college sports or just certain college sports?
Well, every Division I college will have to make a decision. They're all going to get a barrel of money. Where that money comes from yet, I'm not sure. And they're going to have to divvy it up. So, yeah, it'll be the schools. The Big Five conferences are going to have the biggest share of it because they have the biggest TV revenue. They have the most money available. But they're going to have this pot of money, and they're going to have to then, in fact, look what UConn has done right now. UConn basketball has just created a position, general manager. Tom Moore, who was one of the assistant basketball coaches, is now the general manager. Professional teams have general managers, and now we're seeing this on the college level. Bill Belichick did this at North Carolina when he took that football job. So what does that mean, general manager? So it'll be Dan Hurley's job, the coach's jobs, to evaluate the talent and then tell their general manager, these are the guys we want. Now go find out a way to get them, figure out how to pay them, how to bring them in here. It's unbelievable how everything is changing.
Well, is it going to be like a balanced amount of money throughout the different teams? Like every team will get a certain amount of money that they can pay the college players? Like, I guess the NFL and other major league sports are different. Some teams can afford to pay players higher salaries than others, although I think there's a salary cap in football, so that kind of might balance it out a little bit. But how is the structure going to be laid out throughout the different colleges, teams?
Yeah, football has the salary cap. Baseball has the tax. If you spend more, you can spend more, but then you got to pay a whole bunch of millions of dollars in taxes on what you went over that the teams that didn't spend any money get to use. So there's that. But my understanding of the rule is the more successful your programs are, the more money you get. If you generate more TV dollars, if you're on TV more, if you go to championships, if you get more network money, you're going to get a bigger piece of the pie as a university, a college, and then it'll be distributed that way. I don't think it's going to be equal in any way, shape, or form. And these are some of the things that they're going to have to talk through. This is all the result of lawsuits that were put in front of the NCAA, student athletes who were suing the NCAA because they weren't getting paid, and rather than go through all of that and pay billions in lawsuits, they're going to pay billions in salaries to these athletes. Well, I don't think it's going to be an equal distribution.
Well, Joe, do you think it's kind of going to, let's say, keep some of your college basketball freshmen maybe 2 to 3 years longer? Because right now you have the top college freshman basketball players in particular that if they have a high level of talent level, they get drafted kind of in the top first rounds. It's just kind of hard to keep a college basketball player playing for Duke, Kentucky, North Carolina at certain times, comparable to the past. So how would that change the outlook of keeping the college basketball players on a particular team for 3 to 4 years instead of the one and done rule almost?
Well, I think Alex Caravan is the perfect example, who has decided to come back to UConn for yet another year. This is the second year in a row that he decided not to enter the NBA draft. He is back. So I think, here's what I think's happened. The top level players, the first round guys, they're not going to stay. They're going to go because they want to maximize their availability and how much money they can make now. You don't want to risk an injury. I think what happened to Alex Caravan, for instance, last year, the year before they win the national championship, and he was highly rated, but not still a top pick. And I think maybe his stock dropped a little bit this year. They asked him to do a lot. So I think the second and third level players are going to stay. Now, they may not stay at the university or the college they're at because they may get better deals, and that's the transfer portal, which is a whole other huge story. We'll talk about that. But so I think the top guys are still going to go because they're going to make the most money and they're going to make it fast. But the next level guys, they're going to make a lot of money to stay in college, and maybe they get a chance to improve their draft status and while still making big bucks.
Joe, would you still say in college sports towards the transition to professional sports, the odds of most basketball, football, baseball players making it to the professional league is like hitting the lottery? It's only going to be a small percentage, or has it grown a little bit beyond, let's just say, the talent pool in the National Basketball Association? Let's start off with that league has kind of been saturated and maybe dwindled down, that it's kind of a little bit easier today to make it to the pros, or is it still just as difficult as ever for a college player to go straight to the pros?
That is also interesting because I think the players now are better when they get to college. They're better when they come out of college. So I think there are more better players. I don't want to say more better, but there are more players with more skill level, and there are still the same amount of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So the competition is even harder, in my view, as opposed to, for instance, the TV sportscasting business. There are fewer and fewer jobs, and it's kind of like athletics. There are more talented people, but fewer and fewer jobs. And I think in the NBA, there's the same amount of jobs, but there are even more kids competing for those jobs. It's even harder for them to get in. So making this money in college, as long as they can, is really critical.
Well, Joe, you interact or you do like high school football, and you kind of got a relation to some degree seeing high school students in football, how they play. Is it realistic that when you're watching these high school students, that they are aware of the long-term outcome futures that they need to have, not putting all of your eggs in one basket? Because I think every kid believes when you're growing up, particularly if you are skilled in sports, that you're going to go to the pros, that's your ultimate goal. But do you kind of get a sense that you interact with some high school students, probably a little more today, that are trying to do other things with their career or their future more than just putting their eggs all into one basket, trying to make it to the NFL?
Yes, and I think a lot of that comes from coaches more so than parents, because I still think a lot of parents think that, their kids are the deal, the real thing, and they should be starting in every game, and they should be going on to college and starting there. But I think the players are realistic in that enjoy the high school moment, the state championships, the playing, the team sport aspect of it. If you get a college scholarship, you've already beaten the system and the odds if you get offered that. And if you can make that run and get your degree and you get a free ride, you pick up a little nil money, you're already ahead of the game, 99% of them. I mean, in Connecticut, there was one kid drafted, out of UConn, and early in the 6th round. It's a battle, and I think kids are becoming more realistic, and the opportunities for nil money and doing some advertisements and stuff there are even some high schools now around the country that are offering nil money. It's a real problem for high school athletics in some states around the country where high school athletes are getting nil money. And if that doesn't make you think that you're better than everybody else, I don't know what would.
Mm-hmm. Joe, what about the coaching? I mean, sometimes people underestimate the role of a coach in professional sports. Let's say, for instance, Deion Sanders was under the assumption, or he had the desire that he was going to be the coach of the Dallas Cowboys. And all of a sudden, he didn't even get an interview, I believe. Do you think it's just as difficult to become a coach in professional sports as it is to become a professional player?
Well, it's harder because what are there in the NFL? What are there, 32 coaches? There's thousands of players. There's 32 coaching jobs. There's many teams. I don't know how many teams there are. I'm off the top of my head. I'm trying to remember. But you see what I'm saying? So there's lots of assistants to become the head coach. It's like being, a quarterback in the NFL. You're the best. You're one of 32 best in the world, and it's the same thing with coaching football. You're one of an elite group. The guys who have those jobs, they don't resign, you never. When was the last time you heard of a head football coach resigning? They don't give those jobs up. They're making a lot of money. It's a now it's hard work. You're on the clock all the time. But I think it's hard to get there. And when you get there, you want to stay. And you look at how many head coaches who then lost that job, step down and become assistant coaches. They're still in it, but that head coaching job and it's hard to get without experience. It's that's the problem. What comes first, the experience or the job? It's hard to get one without the other.
Right. Well, let's get into a little college basketball. You had recently covered the women's college, I guess, NCAA Final Four, and you was down in Tampa, Florida, basically covering the UConn women's college basketball team. Did anything surprise you this particular year, particularly when UConn was able to really destroy South Carolina in the finals? Was that kind of a shocking ending, or you really weren't that surprised that UConn overwhelmingly defeated South Carolina in the women's college basketball championship game?
Yeah, there was no one who. So in the tournament, UConn was a big favorite in every game, but in the South Carolina game, they were the smallest favorite of any of the teams they played. I think 9 points, but if you go back to the regular season game at South Carolina when they went down there and won, I think, by 31 at South Carolina, that was the turning point of their season. That was the game that told in fact, what happened that day, the next day, Vegas made UConn the odds-on favorite to win the national championship. That game clicked. So now let's get through the tournament. I still think USC has Juju Watkins. If she doesn't get injured, I don't know if the outcome is different, but that was going to be a lot closer game. You can't lose your star player and be as good. There's no doubt about it. UCLA definitely wasn't ready to play UConn. They played a little softer schedule, although they did play USC twice, but they weren't ready. South Carolina, I was not surprised UConn won. I thought they would win. I was surprised by the margin of victory in that game. What surprised me more than the game itself is how big women's college basketball is now, how it's being covered. There were more media at this particular Final Four than any Final Four I've been to. And I've been covering the UConn women since 2006 when I got here. So that was, this is my 20th season covering them. By far, the most interest, the most media. It's impressive. And as Gino also said in one of his pressers, what's even more impressive is how many women media members there are covering the sport now. There are more and more women media members, from television to podcasting to writing, to shooting their own video, to photographers. More women than ever covering women's sports. Gino actually mentioned it during one of the pressers, and I noticed it too. But the media coverage, women's basketball has exploded in a huge way.
I'm not going to say women's basketball has surpassed the NBA. I mean, I might even ask you that question, but it seems like the NBA and recently has been dropping towards their ratings. Is there any indication why, let's say, the NBA ratings are starting to slip comparable to the past, in your opinion?
So, in my opinion, a lot of it has to do with the stars don't play every night. Mm-hmm. Every team has its one or two stars, but, they've got this thing now where they have to take off a certain amount of. Do you remember Michael Jordan ever taking a game off? Larry Bird ever taking a game off? They don't take games off. They play more games. Mm-hmm. But now we're at a time in the NBA where players are reducing, the stress, reducing the amount of physical activity they have. They save themselves for bigger games, take more games off. And I think if you want to watch your team on TV, you want to see your star player. If he's not in the game, I don't think you're. Now, does the diehard still watch? Of course. Mm-hmm. Does the casual fan, maybe somebody who wants to check in and see, like, for instance, I'm not a big NBA fan. I will follow the Knicks just because of my New York upbringing. The fact that they beat Boston last night in Boston down by 20, I could care less about that game normally. But now my interest is piqued because the Knicks were a big underdog. So I'm a casual NBA fan. I'm probably less than casual, but my interest is piqued. But I think the casual fan gets turned off with the notion they're not seeing the stars play every night.
But I think, Joe, if you even break it down, the talent level of the NBA, the players can jump higher, they're faster, they're bigger and stronger, they got basketball, ball handling skills. I think the only person that comes to mind is the late Pete Maravich, who was kind of ahead of his time with his basketball. Pistol Pete. I mean, there was other players out there too that could dribble, but Pistol Pete was kind of relative towards what you see today in the level of a street ball player. But the talent level, let's say in the NBA, still doesn't seem to be carrying over the competitiveness that the old school NBA styles had when the Lakers versus the Celtics, you put the Philadelphia 76ers with Dr. J into the mix. Then you translate it into Michael Jordan with the Chicago Bulls. Then you had the Los Angeles Lakers with Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant. Something I think is missing. I don't know. Sometimes I hear that the referees are allowing the players to take 3 and 4 steps to travel to the basket when it's only supposed to be 2 steps. Do you think the overall competitiveness of the game, too, has kind of really dwindled a little bit?
Well, I think the biggest thing is how the game has changed. I mean, do you really want to see people with the Celtics? They're on 35 or 43s last night. Mm-hmm. How many do you want to watch guys all the time? I mean, let's talk about the UConn men. I mean, we know about the women. Mm-hmm. The college game to me is about, and if you play it right, like Dan Hurley's teams do and like Gino's teams do, it's watching the game and the way players look for each other and the passes and the cuts, moving the ball around, getting somebody open. Here's a screen. It's not all about it's the beauty of the game. And I think we've lost some of that skill level. We're not passing the ball around as much in the NBA. We're looking for the guy who's got the 3 and he knocks it down. They take a lot of them. Or you're driving it as a slam dunk. Those are the 2 biggest plays right now, right, in the NBA. Mm-hmm. But how often do you see the ball? I mean, again, someone who watches casual, but I know I love watching a well-coached team that executes plays that you can tell they practice, getting players open, ball moving, here, there, hit that guy, call that timeout, get the play you want. To me, I just think the game has changed, and maybe younger people like that style, but I can't believe that veterans, guys who have been around a long time, who appreciated Larry and Michael and Magic and as you say, all those guys. I just think the game is changing. I think that's changed people's perception of watching it.
Well, what about even in college basketball? Would you like to see a couple rules changes, like the 3-point line? Is that line in college basketball a little bit too close to the basket? You think it should be pushed back a little bit further? Do you think the 5 fouls and you're being ejected, you think that should probably go to 6 fouls like the NBA? Are there any rules in the college basketball game that you would like to see changed or adjusted a little bit?
Well, I do like more fouls because I think you watch the Big East men especially play every single night is a grind and it's physical, and the officials I think let them play. And I think you're right. I think an extra foul would be helpful. I mean, look at how many times you see the big guys fouling out of games, and then you lose them and you go to the backup. I'd have no problem with extra foul. I still like to know what the difference between a charge and a block is. Mm-hmm. It's a very hard one to see. I don't have a problem with the 3-point line. I think hitting 37%, if that's the average, is okay. I have no problem with where it is. If they start making, if they're making them more than they're making those little 15-foot jumpers, then maybe we move that. But other than that, I like the game. It is physical. There's no doubt about it. Sometimes there's too many fouls called, but I don't know if you're going to play a physical game. I mean, you got to if somebody's chopping away at you and hacking you, you got to call it. But I like the game as it is, but I think we could allow, for another foul in there.
Joe, recently we had the NFL draft, and there might be some debate, Joe. Is it the best way to build a team through the draft, or do you build it through free agency? Because the Dallas Cowboys seem to draft very well, but they don't do well recently in free agency. Do you think you need to do both, or would you put more emphasis on the drafting, or would you put more emphasis on keeping some of your best players and being able to sign some of your free agent players?
That's a hard one. I mean, personally, I would prefer to keep the guys I have who are really good. Mm-hmm. The problem is that the shelf life, the career life is so short on these guys as they're building these great careers, and it's time for you to keep them. They're starting to slide down the other side of the mountain. Mm-hmm. It's, they've peaked so early after, what's the average? I forget what the average is for a running back, 2.5 years, 3 years, something like that. And they're gone in the NFL. So I personally think that if you can get free agents at their peak, you're going to have to pay for them. You know what you got? Again, when you get a college kid, he's great in college, okay? But how does that translate to the NFL? How does that guy who now is no longer going to school, who's on his own, who's got to come to a job every day, he's got to take care of himself every day, he's got to adjust to the speed, the strength, the power of the NFL. You don't know how that's going to happen. When you go with free agents, you've already seen how that guy plays, what his strengths are. He's already made the adjustment to college. Now, do I want a couple of superstars who I can develop? Yes, but I still think if you can build, and that's why the salary cap is so important. You just can't go out and buy every single great free agent there is. You do a combo, but I love the idea of keeping. And by the way, this is what's happening in college football. This is why now UConn football is, they went 9-4 last year. UConn football won 9 games, and in my opinion, the reason they won that many and will be able to continue to is because of the transfer portal. So Jim Mora, the coach of UConn, is now going fewer and fewer high school players. We talked about, whether there's more kids going to college out of high school. Well, they're recruiting fewer and fewer high school players because then you've got to develop them for 2, 3, hopefully they develop, and by their 4th year, they're really good. But in the transfer portal, you're already getting kids who have proven themselves in college, who are pretty good, who you've seen play, and who you can bring in right away. And you can do it every single year. So the good news is you're able to get new players, proven players, every year. The bad news is you're losing good, proven players from your own team that are also going to the portal. But I think it's what makes UConn football more relevant than ever, assuming you make the right choices. Jim Mora has said the biggest challenge to this is you don't develop relationships with these players. You don't know who they are. You see them in the portal, and you're going to try to grab them without developing. You don't recruit them. You haven't met their family, or you don't know where they're from. You just grab them based on what they've done in college. So that's the downside. But the upside is you can get better players immediately, and you can fit them right in and plug in your program. I think it's huge for these lower level schools that have trouble getting, the 5-star recruits.
Well, Joe, speaking of UConn college football, is UConn a Division I or Division II? I just want to clarify.
No, they're big. They're big boy football. They're playing all the big, and their problem is as an independent, they don't win a conference champ. They can't compete for a conference title. So it makes it almost impossible for them to play for a national championship. They could go undefeated and probably still have a tough time being in that 12-team college football field. 8 teams now, it's going to go to 12. So they're playing, last year they played up in Syracuse. almost one up there. They've played Michigan down here at Rensselaer Field, Florida State. They play at the top level, but as an independent, it's harder to get those kinds of teams to come in and to play at your place. So they're playing, teams that are trying to fill in their schedule on the back end. And it's interesting because UConn used to be a team that the really good teams would put on their schedule thinking that it would be an easy win. Well, now they're not as easy a win anymore. In fact, they're beating some of these teams that nobody thought they were going to beat. So it's probably going to be even tougher for them to schedule games as an independent.
But Joe, if UConn was to go undefeated, they wouldn't be in the top 25. Doesn't that?
Well, they could be in the top 25, but even in the top 25 doesn't mean you're going to get in. The conferences, the Power 5 conferences have all the clout, have all the money. The thing that will always go against UConn is any committee, UConn football, they'll look at their schedule. If you play in the SEC, you've already played 4 top 5 teams. You play them, in the Big 12 with Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State and Illinois and Wisconsin and Iowa. You've already played, and now UCLA and USC. You've already played a tough schedule, so their schedule would work against them even if they went undefeated. But
they're still currently in the Big East conference.
They are for their other sports, but for football, they are an independent.
Independent, okay.
The Big East doesn't have, a football. Big East football used to be really, really good. It was back in the day. It was, Syracuse and Pitt and West Virginia and all the. But, now there's no Big East football. It's mainly the Catholic schools and, a couple of independents playing in their non-Catholic schools, and it's mainly a basketball conference. Some of UConn's other sports play in there, baseball and softball and track and field, volleyball, but hockey's in a different conference. But yeah, they're in the Big East for the other sports, but for football, they are an independent.
Okay. Let's shift a little bit to Major League Baseball. I know you're a Yankees fan, and it seems like the Yankees have a lot of talent. But for some reason, over the past, I think the last World Series the New York Yankees won was in 2009, I believe.
Yeah.
Do you see like a little curse maybe going against the Yankees recently that they got so much talent, but they can't seem to get over the hump?
I don't think it's a curse. First of all, the hump is going to be the Dodgers.
Mm-hmm.
They're by far, in my opinion, the best team in baseball. They will be. The way they've structured their contracts, deferring payments to their players. They go out and they don't mind paying the tax, the luxury tax. So, you get a lot of different winners in baseball for whatever the reason. It's not like the days when the Yankees dominated. The players are moving around so much with free agency. They get Juan Soto for 1 year. Juan Soto was a key player on that team that went to the World Series last year. Now he's at the Mets, and he makes the Mets more relevant. So it's harder to keep players. They're offering them, money drives the whole thing now. When you can get money someplace else, where your loyalty. So for instance, as a team, baseball fan, you're rooting for your team you're never rooting for players anymore because the players move. The fact that the Yankees will have Aaron Judge for his whole career and that, the Dodgers will have, their big gun for the rest of his career. It's rare. Players are moving all the time. You don't buy. What's the point of buying? There are no more Derek Jeters around, believe me, who play their whole career. These guys who buy jerseys, these fans who buy jerseys with team names and numbers on them, with the player's name on them. Well, the next year they're a different player with a different name and a different number. So I think that's one of the biggest factors, that the players are moving around. It's hard to build. And the game has changed again, where the skill level is different. The whole game now is analytics. They put a whole bunch of numbers into a computer, and computers are making managers make decisions rather than what's happened is that analytics have eliminated the gut decisions that managers used to make. Go with their gut, leave a guy a little longer, bunt here, don't hit the long ball here. That's changed the game. And the other thing is, everybody wants to hit home runs. So now if you hit 250, you're considered a good hitter. But if you hit 18 home runs and you're driving 70 runs, you're a great player. In the old days, that guy might be on the bench in baseball. So that's the biggest thing that's changed.
Well, also there's been some rule changes. Is there instant replay in Major League Baseball?
Yes, they do have instant replay. You get a couple of challenges. Now, the one thing you cannot challenge are balls and strikes. And even if you come out of the dugout and argue that, or a player argues a ball or a strike, they can be thrown out of the game immediately. But there are plays at first base, or on the bases. You see a lot of the times the call at first base gets challenged, whether the ball has gone over the fence or it hits the top of the fence. That's been challenged. Steals at second. And you can challenge as a manager, but if you lose the challenge, then you lose that challenge. You don't get another opportunity to do it. So they try to use them judiciously, but it comes into play, and I've seen some reversals. But once again, it's like the replay in football. Most of the time, if you can't tell, it always stays with the call that's made on the field.
Mm-hmm. What about the Red Sox? Did they make a drastic mistake when they let Mookie Betts leave, I believe, through free agency, or was that a trade? I think that was a trade.
No, he was. My understanding is they didn't want to pay him, or couldn't pay him, or didn't want to pay him what he was asking for. And there's no doubt in my mind that's a huge. I mean, look what he does for the Dodgers. I think that's a huge lost. Right. And they've been burned. They re-signed Chris Sale. He gets hurt a couple of times. He leaves them, and then he goes out and has a good season after he leaves the Red Sox. It's such a, I think it just depends on your mindset. If you're filling your stadium, which they do, and you get great TV ratings, which they do, what's the incentive to win?
Mm-hmm.
Pride? I mean, pride. Yeah, most cases it's pride. You look at other teams, who are owned by billionaires. They're making money. They know they can't compete with, the big guys. So they just kind of go through the motion. They fill the stadium. They sell their concessions. They get their TV money, and they go about the business of knowing it's impossible. It's a rarity when somebody comes out, one of the lower paying teams can do it. Mostly it's the guys, and the Red Sox are one of those teams with a big payroll. The Mets, the Dodgers, the Yankees, those are. So when a team like, for instance, the Indians comes up with with a less payroll, and they win consistently, that's impressive. That means you got young players who are really just trying as hard as they can to be as good as they can. And also with those teams, you have to evaluate talent really well. You can't afford, to make mistakes because your margin for success is so slim.
Mm-hmm. But do you think it will ever be a time when Fenway Park will be demolished and you'll have a new baseball park in Boston? Or that no, okay.
No way. That to me, that's an iconic ballpark. I mean, Yankee Stadium obviously was as well. Wrigley Field is another that I think will never be knocked down. Fenway. There's no way, as long as they can keep that thing really neat, like when they put the seats over the Green Monster. That was a big move. And as long as the toilets flush and the concessions work and everything like that, it's iconic. You have to see a game at Fenway Park. Just like the new Yankee Stadium is nowhere near as good as the old Yankee Stadium, as much as they try to make it. Wrigley Field is spectacular. I've seen games there. I think Dodger Stadium is one of those that is just going to stay. No need to move it around. There are some out there that you just have to, St. Louis, the Cardinals, Busch. There's just some stadiums that if you can keep them running, keep them up to snuff. How many amenities do you need? They're building these big stadiums now for football. I get that. They're trying to put more fans in. They're trying to make them a little better for the weather. But baseball plays in the good weather mostly. People want to sit outside and have a good time. I mean, look at our ballpark in Hartford.
Mm-hmm.
That Duncan Park where the Yard Goats play, I still maintain that most of the people who go to yard games, they couldn't tell you 4 players or 3 players on the team. But the experience of going to the game and paying $5 for parking and bringing your whole family to a ball game where you can spend less than $100 on tickets and also on, food and beverage and see a game up close on a brand new stadium. That's why that stadium is successful and why baseball at the minor league level, and then you're entertained in between innings and they have all these little gimmicks going on. That's what sells baseball at the minor league level. But it's a beautiful park. But again, you don't have to be a baseball fan to go to a Yard Goats game and just have a good time.
So you're going to continue to probably see in the NFL retractable stadiums or dome stadiums, or probably more likely retractable stadiums, because you have the benefit of having the field open if the weather is nice and then closed if the weather is cold or not nice. Is that something that you think is good for professional football? Is that something that you would kind of leave it alone? I mean, what's your judgment on that trend?
My opinion is every time they build a new stadium, it should have a roof that retracts, because football in December is brutal to sit in that's when now they may sell the tickets, but there are a lot of fans who are not going to go to, first of all, the experience of watching on television is so good, but it's hard to drive an hour and a half or 2 hours in traffic, go to a stadium, then sit in the cold. Not everybody's built like Green Bay, where those fans just grow up going to that stadium. I think the comfort level is huge. I don't think it has to be about, braving the weather, the elements for the fans. I think the more comfortable you can make it with the more monitors you have and the more amenities you have, to me, that's the stadium of the future. Retractable roof, air conditioned. I covered Syracuse for 9 years, and going to those football games in the Dome in November, December, believe me, that was well appreciated, as opposed to when I was going to Penn State games in November and December, and the wind's howling in there, and it's cold, and it's just harder, first of all, to watch as a fan. It's harder to cover as a media member. Comfort is critical.
Mm-hmm. We haven't talked about the National Hockey League. Is the National Hockey League now, I think they're number 4, or they could be number 3, but let's just say they're number 4. Do you think people are going to start to look at hockey a little bit more diverse than what it currently exists?
My thing about hockey is, and I got my start in broadcasting covering the Syracuse Blazers hockey team in 73. Mm-hmm. I love hockey. The best thing about hockey is watching it in person. It's the best sport in the building. TV, and look at before HD, you had a real hard time even seeing the puck on television. HD has helped that a lot, but seeing hockey in person is still the way to go. And I don't think that hockey will ever look at. I've had people tell me for years, 40 years ago, they were telling me that soccer was going to replace football in America as the major sport. And I laughed then and I laugh now for people who think that's true. It's not true. It's never going to happen. Not in the U.S. And I think hockey has its rightful place. I will say this, that the best players to interview are hockey players. They're usually the most polite. They have the least amount of ego. They're enjoyable to cover. I think they like their niche. They're all making a lot of money. The arenas are really good, and I think hockey is right where it should be in this country. Will there be an expansion? I think expansion is possible. Not for Hartford, but I think expansion is definitely a possibility.
But Joe, wasn't one time hockey like almost the WWE? You always would have fights. I don't know if it was real fights or it was just staged. And it seemed like you're watching a hockey game, and for 5 minutes, you're watching 2 players fight, and the referees are not doing anything to really break up the fight. Does that level still exist in hockey, or has that changed?
No, so that has changed, but you're correct when you say that in the old days, in the minor leagues especially, and again, the probably most famous hockey movie, other than the one about the U.S. winning beating the Russians in the Olympics, is Slapshot, which Paul Newman started. And that movie was basically based on the Eastern Hockey League, which the Syracuse Blazers were a part of. And in fact, part of the movie was shot in Syracuse. I read for one of the announcer parts in that movie. I didn't get it, but in those days, I went to games where some of the seats were folding chairs, and fans would be throwing them out on the ice at players. And these were real fights. These weren't people, it wasn't the WWE where things were scripted. The players had what were called goons on their team, who are now called enforcers, in the NHL, and fights would break out and fans would get involved. And it was entertaining, especially if you were the home team. And, officials, and I think probably there was a concerted effort to let them go for a while until somebody really, really got hurt. But there were lots of fights in those days, and there was a lot of activity in the stands with fans. Believe me, it was. That's how I cut my teeth on hockey and broadcasting, covering those kinds of hockey games.
Right. Joe, as we're kind of winding down for this particular segment, people could always still tune in on WFSB Channel 3. What's your schedule that you are on throughout the week?
So for me, as now the UConn beat reporter, I pretty much cover all things UConn Monday through Thursday. I went to every UConn women's home game. I'd say 90% of them. The men's game when they don't conflict, hockey. So I'm covering those sports a lot because we are the media partner for UConn. But Fridays, we're still covering high school sports. We have our Friday night football show. That's a 15-minute show. It comes on 11:15. We call it Friday Night Football. And we go out and we put 10, 11, 12 teams on television on Friday night. And then football's over and we jump right over to the basketball, the winter sports season with hockey and basketball and gymnastics. That's wrestling is part of that. And we do a 15-minute show then at 11:15. And now we're into the spring sports where it's softball and baseball and lacrosse and boys volleyball and track and field. And the mission is to put as many kids on TV as we can, because look at, a lot of things have changed in broadcasting in the 50 years I've been in. Nobody stays up anymore to watch Joe Zone give them Yankees or Red Sox highlights at 11:15. Mm-hmm. They don't do it. They get their highlights somewhere else. But here's what hasn't changed. Mom and dad still want to see their kid on the television. And they don't want to see them on their cell phone or the computer in the office. They want to see them on the big TV in the living room. That hasn't changed in 50 years. What time's it going to be on? And I get more reaction to anything I do, more thank yous for covering high school sports. Thanks for coming. Thanks for putting our kids in a positive light. Thanks for being here. We love what you do. I get more positive feedback on covering high school sports than anything else I do. Let's face it, UConn is, this close to being, a professional broadcast network with their big time announcers and all that. And their kids are used to being on TV. But when you can go to a high school game and put on a junior, a 16-year-old who maybe you made one basket and we put them on, that's a lifetime memory for them, believe it or not. So I still get a great deal of joy. In fact, I've been on the beat so long and I've been part of it for so long that Thursday night, I'm going into the Connecticut High School Coaches Hall of Fame, a media member joining 9 other coaches. So clearly what we've been doing at Channel 3 with high school kids is still appreciated and still one of the things I get the most enjoyment out of.
Well, Joe, that sounds like an excellent way to end this particular segment, and congratulations on your upcoming award. And it was really fun and down-to-earth talking to you. You come across as a real humble, down-to-earth person, like I ask every particular guest every single week. If there's any last words, any last things you want people to know about yourself or what you're currently doing, feel free to express yourself.
No, I think we've covered it. I get two questions, these days: why and when.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you still doing it? And when are you getting out? Well, I still do it because I still love the rush, the buzz, the excitement, thousands of fans at the things I'm at. It's called work. My work is what everybody else has to pay to do. So that's why. When? Probably with the camera, slumped over, microphone in my limp hand, they'll be dragging me off to a morgue somewhere. I think that's probably when. That's a good note to end it on.
It is. And keep up the good work because we love you, Joe. We love what you're doing, and you're like a breath of fresh air every time I seem to tune in and listen to you. And it was a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Likewise. You're welcome. Take care.
You got it.
Okay, this is Jonathan Small. I had just enjoyed hosting this edition with WFSB Ch3 Sports Director Joe Zone, and it was a real, like I just mentioned, down-to-earth, fun conversation with Joe, and hopefully for you, the listeners, you found it as well as a fun, down-to-earth, particular atmosphere of an interview show. Currently working on a guest in the show for next week, but until you see me again, for viewers out there, have a very blessed day and keep the faith. Thank you.